Hello, all you kings, queens, and those in between, and welcome to episode 25 of the Busted Limes podcast. I'm your host, Paresh Maharaj, and as you probably guessed by now, Black Belt will not be joining us because he is editing the aforementioned cool shit that I tell you that he's working on, and trust me, I think y'all are gonna love it. But for right now, we've got a long overdue return to the podcast. Everyone's favorite soup connoisseur, good old Fredo. Fredo,
That's
say hi.
right. That's right. It's me, baby. I'm back. we can't get enough of Fredo on any podcast. I'm all over the place, baby. So how we doing? What's up, bud?
Oh, just keeping with my oh so regular release schedule by
Uh-huh.
recording this episode only 2 months after our last one, just you know keeping up with the, in case you couldn't hear the sarcasm, that was sarcasm.
No,
We
hey, it
Yeah.
happens sometimes. I mean, shout out my buddy Arlen who does the Hell Zone that I've been on a few times. Really
Yeah.
great, very fun podcast. And same thing, it's hard to get into the habit of doing your recording every week. Especially when your podcast is not like so huge that it's your job. I think for folks that are getting millions of downloads, you can kind of schedule around it. For everybody else, it's a little bit tricky.
Yeah, but I've heard that the best way to turn something you love into something that you hate is to turn into a job anyway. So you know what? I think I'll keep Busted Limes as a hobby,
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And that's true. There's research behind it. But you know what? I'm
Mhm.
not going to talk about that because I am instead going to railroad you. I hope you have some Station Square music handy because I'm going to sample an energy drink for the first time here
What the
live on this.
fuck? Oh,
You did
wow.
not know about this. We're going to
No,
get
I
just
did not.
completely
No,
detoured.
no, I did
I
not.
have sitting in front of me here a can of Tetris Blast G Fuel energy drink. No indication of what the actual flavor is. It just says Tetris Blast.
Tetra. Yeah,
Tetris,
again,
yes, it is a
listeners, this is not scripted. Like, this is not. This is completely out of the blue here.
Yes,
So
that's right.
yeah.
So I am going to open up and sample this can of Tetris Blast and drink it during the recording. It says here, let's see, Tetris Holding. Tetris logos and the Tetrinimos are trademarks of Tetris Holding. It's an official Tetris product. All right, here, let's try. I got this one and I got the Sonic Peach rings, but the Sonic Peach rings, obviously, that's peach flavor. I'm going to lean in close so you can listen to the. There we go. Oh yes. All right, and take a whiff of this bad boy. Kind of getting a tropical fruit sense, like a mango or something. Let's see here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. That's. I think it's maybe meant to be like a fruit punch type of flavor. I'm not quite sure I can.
Hmm.
Yeah. Or like a little, almost like a cotton candy, huh?
Ooh, okay, that actually sounds kind of
Yeah,
cool.
cotton candy, fruit punch, sort of.
And you said this was called a Tetris thing?
Tetris Blast. It's
Hmm.
So G Fuel is a brand of energy drinks, and most of them are like actual flavors, right? It's like whatever. It's um, blueberry, but they all have some kind of gamer thing, right? So it's like
Right.
whatever, blueberry blast or whatever,
Right.
But then last time I was at the store, I noticed that in addition to the usual suite of flavors, they had the Tetris flavor and they had the Sonic flavor. So like, well, I gotta try these. Yeah, I don't know. Tetris Blast G Fuel, weird aftertaste. Wow, lots of 300 milligrams caffeine per can. Jesus Christ, it's like 3
Well,
cups of
shit, get
coffee.
me one. You should have started
Yeah.
with that.
Oh. Well, this bad boy's definitely going to put me in the mood to podcast and play video games all night. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
One thumb up, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was going. That's actually what I was getting to, because Tetris is a video game, and you know what else is a video game? The subject
I
of our
don't know any other video games. The only one I've heard of is Tetris.
Oh shit. Okay, consider this your intro to the next level of gaming, which is the topic of our discussion for today, which is 2022's Game of the Year from Software's Elden Ring.
All right. And now, is that like
Yes.
Tetris? Is
Um
it like a similar, like a Tetris
it's
type game?
it's easier.
It's easier than I mean,
Yeah.
I guess depending on how you
No,
consider the difficulty, you could make that
I
argument.
am garbage at Tetris. Let me tell you. I could
I'm not bad.
like,
I'm not bad.
yeah.
Puyo Puyo Tetris, I'm a fan of that too. The hybrid game where it switches back and forth because I'm pretty. I enjoy both of those.
Mm, okay. Well, yes. So I figure the best way for us to start with this conversation is, yeah, the publisher, or is it publisher or studio that's From Software? Because I think From Software is the studio. The publisher is Bandai Namco.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
this case, they're developing these games.
Right, right. So I kind of want to start it off with what our history is with From Software games, because as you've hopefully listened to my previous minisodes, From Software, they're that studio who's famous for producing those games that force you to, for better and for worse, get good. Things
Hmm.
like Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Sekiro, Bloodborne, and of course Elden Ring. So I'll start, since this is my podcast and I feel like you owe me for derailing it with your G Fuel bullshit
I don't know
earlier.
what you're talking about. That was quality content.
And debate. We'll see if the views reflect that.
Yeah, listeners leave comments about how much you enjoyed the Tetris G Fuel Tetris Blast review.
Yeah. So just for those who missed my earlier Bloodborne minisode, my history with From Software is I actually started and did not finish Dark Souls 2, which whenever I tell people that, they immediately cringe themselves inside out, just like, oh dude, that's a terrible place to start. No wonder you didn't like these games going into it, or at first. But I didn't really get into these games until I started playing Bloodborne, and Bloodborne I feel like is still From Software's crown jewel. It
And
is
you're like a
the
big Bloodborne guy. I know that. You've played
oh
through that one a lot, right?
oh god, yeah, I have. And yeah, it was my first of my 3 From Software Platinum trophies that I have. The other ones being Elden Ring and also Sekiro, which, oh my god, that is still the hardest first playthrough out of every From Software game. Sekiro, the when I got the hell, when I finished the game for the first time, when I reached the credits for
Yeah.
the first time, I literally called my brother into the room and was just like, "Hey, come watch me! I'm about to beat Sekiro for the first time." It was that much of a challenge for me.
Sekiro was it's the only one I haven't finished. It's too much for me. I just could never get good enough at that one.
And you know what? I completely understand, because let me tell you, I got stuck at one boss. I don't even remember who. I literally took a year off, uninstalled it, and then eventually I got the inspiration to install it again, and then yeah, I eventually got over the steep learning curve. And the thing is with Sekiro is it it has a steep learning curve, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes the easiest among all the games. But that's only if you get over the learning curve. Yeah.
I guess I just never got over the hump, and we'll talk about it. I mean,
Because
usually I'm all right at these types of games, but that
mhm.
one just never clicked with me. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, I think I could actually offer an explanation why. Is because it is unlike any other of this other Souls games. Like, whereas
Yeah,
other Soul games have an emphasis on dodging and timing your dodge rolls properly,
yeah, it's more
Sekiro is all about
parrying.
parrying. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So but yeah, I all this to say that I think that's a good starting point for as far as Elden Ring goes, is its difficulty. But you know what's your history with the From Software games, Fredo?
yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like a cool guy here, like I was into it before it was cool, but I'm like an OG guy for FromSoft games. So I was a fan of theirs before Demon Souls. Like I came up playing like Kingsfield and Armored Core and stuff on the original PlayStation, and Echo Knight and Eternal Ring, the spin-off to Kingsfield on the PS2, Evergrace, their super weird RPG,
Hmm.
all sorts of stuff that they had done. And I remember, I've got a list of their games in front of me here just to remind myself. Otogi on the Xbox, that was a great one too. Um, And I remember I was one of the very early people that was like super hype for Demon Souls because I'd really enjoyed the Kingsfield games years earlier, and I was hankering for a good medieval fantasy game, and the early previews it looked like outstanding, so I was super excited. I got that game like day one, and I was the guy that was telling all my friends about it, and then it blew up into a big thing a little bit later on. So it's one of those areas. I mean, not always. I'm not one of these like video game hipsters that's like I was into it before it was cool.
Right,
But
right.
Demon Souls and Dark Souls and all that stuff, that was the case for me. Loved Demon Souls, was probably my game of the year that year. Really enjoy the Dark Souls games, and we can get into it, but I do think FromSoft kind of got into this weird zone of overemphasizing a different kind of difficulty as those games went on, and Elden Ring mostly curtailed it. But I was less into like the later Dark Souls games because it really seemed like they. I mean, you saw it in their marketing, right? Prepare to die and the Prepare to Die edition, right? They really
Yeah, yeah, I
went.
remember those. Yeah.
Yeah, they really went like cartoon hard, and it felt you had more and more moments, and I like all those games. I mean, I'm not trying to say like
Yeah, yeah.
they got shitty, but like I feel like there were more moments that I think of it as like fake. I read the term fake difficulty somewhere like years ago, and it stuck with me. But like not fake
Uh,
difficulty, but when it feels like you're fighting the mechanics of the game, where you're getting killed because you have to babysit the camera in this area and you're not able to see an enemy, or there's
right.
I don't know, you're having to fight this multiple bosses or bosses with a bunch of archers on a ledge that you can't get to, and it's kind of like luck based because you're never going to get a window, or you're going to get maybe lucky that you get the right window to actually be able to hit the boss. Like the
Mhm.
later games seem to have more of that kind of stuff, which I didn't like. More of these fights I have to do 75 times, and 70 of those times I'm dying because of stuff like that. Um, and that's a little bit of a bummer, but I like their games a lot. Their like world design I think is extraordinary. Elden Ring I also thought was extraordinary. I was not really a fan of the final boss because it was sort of one of those things, and we'll talk
Mhm.
about that.
Mhm.
But I think they do great stuff. I'm really excited for the new Armored Core. I enjoyed
Yeah.
those games a lot, and I'm really wondering what they're going to do with this new one. Obviously, like a lot of folks, curious how they're going to follow up Elden Ring as well.
Yeah, because getting into Elden Ring now is you mentioned their how well their sets are designed. So I will say that for all my gripes about this game, which I will get into, but
Mhm.
I try to keep the show genuinely positive, so I won't go immediately into that. But
Yeah, and look, hey, we're talking
yeah,
about the game because we like it, right? This isn't
yes,
like a
exactly. Yeah,
yeah, of course.
yeah. We're if you want just mindless hate on the internet, just go back to Musk's Blue Bird app.
Oh my
Just
god,
like I
let's,
don't.
let's not even get it.
Yeah, which not yeah, not getting into that. So but yeah, overall I love the game, and because the very first time you open that door into the first area, which I think is called Limgrave or Lanedale.
L- l- no, Lingrave. Those are two because Lindall's the capital that you get to a little later, right?
Oh, okay. Is
Yes, I think so.
wait, so well, the opening area. Hang on, let me. Very expert. Yeah, we were very prepared for this episode, weren't
Yeah,
we?
yeah, I know. I don't have that in front of me either. But I think Lingrave is like the name of the region that you open up in. And Lindall's like, the
Limgrave.
third or whatever. I guess you could approach them in whatever order.
Yeah, you can. And honestly, yeah, it's I forget it. I'll. But people scream at us in the comments, but I
I
don't
know.
care.
Like, what the hell? You guys don't even
Yeah,
know the names of the
the first
areas.
area was like because here's the thing, everything about a common comparison that I heard this game well being compared to was Breath of the Wild, and that you
Yeah,
can go anywhere from the beginning.
one
Like the
hundred
minute
percent.
yeah, the minute you go through that door and the world is open to you at the very beginning. So I'll
Yeah,
do that. I'll do that thing where I'll open the door. I'll immediately go straight to Kaled and get the fucking berserk sword, and use that as my weapon and just cleave through bosses like uh Morgott and that, you know, the open boss, the first few bosses, and even those cave trolls that you run into, and those mini bosses from all the caves that you can explore. So let's just begin with where do you think this game ranks as far as difficulty level? Because if you ask me, I honestly think that given all of the tools that the game gives you, it I still place it at one of the easier From Software games, because especially once you find your play style, and trust me, this is a game where it's very easy to find your play style because of the amount of
Yeah.
options you get. You could either go the pure melee route, which if you ask me is hard mode, because
Which is what we did. Yeah,
which is
heavy.
exactly what we did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
strength builds with big ass weapons. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you because one of the things about it that I really appreciated is, up until the final boss, even when you do run into an instance of like, man, I can't figure out this boss or this is too tough, you can always leave and go check out some other area, find some gear, get stronger, come back with better stuff and some more levels and try it again. And you don't really, I mean, the previous games were open ended to some degree, and you had a little bit of flexibility to do that. But they weren't these like giant open worlds where you could like just leave a marker and come back to something 80 hours later, right? Like this one is. So every time I found myself getting frustrated with a boss, instead of just butting my head against it over and over and over and over again, which sometimes happen with frustrating bosses in
Mm-hmm.
Dark Souls 2 and 3, I'd go do something else, and I'm like, well, I'll put a note and I'll check this out later, and then I'll check it out later, and it would be like totally doable. So, yeah, I think and it mostly felt fair. I mean, I think that the open world also gave you a lot of opportunity to like get away from fights and stuff. Like if you were getting,
Right.
if you were getting owned,
Yeah.
there were a lot of times wasn't out.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely some difficult parts. I wouldn't say it's like dramatically easier, compared to the Dark Souls series or to
Yeah,
Demon
honestly, I
Souls.
agree.
Yeah.
It's like I still like. Let me clarify. When I say that it's on the easier end of all the Souls games, what I mean is that it's easier compared to other Souls games. Like that's still well, not even getting that's not even getting into the late game, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But again, you've got things like co-op, and I especially love the, I guess you call them, are you call them quality of life features that they have. Like they are very, this game is very generous with its checkpoints and its
Yeah,
bonfires.
it's
Yeah.
more generous than
Mhm.
the other games, and yeah, QOL stuff is better in this game than the other games too. It still has like the sort of trademark from soft jank and weird stuff that it doesn't explain. They all kind of have that to an almost charming degree.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
think it is definitely more intuitive and easier to understand and more flexible than any of their other games. It's easier to get into, I think, for sure, than if you sat somebody down in front of like your example of Dark Souls 2, you're going to
Ugh.
have a harder time acclimating to that than you are acclimating to this. I think there's a reason that a lot of people got into this that didn't really like the Souls games, So I think they
Right, right.
they nailed it in that regard. I mean, it's still a very challenging game, but they were able to reach a broader audience with it because it is easier to get into and more intuitive in a lot of ways.
Yeah, precisely. And if you ask me, it even, and it's still being updated. So I remember, God, those early games where you're able to find these things called bell bearings, where if you trade them into like the Shrine Maiden husks at the little central hub that every Souls game has, you're able to just buy upgrade materials whenever you need to. Now, in the first build of the game, once you got those bell bearings, you had to get them again if you went through another New Game Plus cycle. With recent updates, you don't have to do that anymore.
Oh,
Now
neat.
on yeah, I know. It's so I get what you're saying as far as From Software kind of disappearing up their own asses as far as difficulty goes, but they still have a sense of ways to make things convenient for the player.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree
and
with you. Yeah.
yeah. for
And the
sure.
the
And
bell bearings, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but the
no, you're
bell
good.
bearings are a really interesting example of precisely this kind of like being a little bit more kind to the players because instead of having, a finite amount of like, well, you're going to have to pick two weapons and upgrade them because there's only enough materials in the game to upgrade two weapons. They made
Hmm.
it so like, well, you could actually buy infinite upgrade materials if you find all these bearings and you could build up a bunch of different weapons and not get locked into like it lets you respec a bunch of times too, right? Like the
Oh
the
yeah,
other the other games all had like you had to commit, you had to like pick one or two weapons and stick to them. You had to like be very meticulous about your build. It was easy to fuck up and like put points where you shouldn't put points, and there was no way to respec. I mean, they
right,
were like cruel in that regard, and this one is a lot less cruel about that kind of stuff, which I appreciate.
right, right. And that kind of ties into my one of my first criticisms of that game is it seems to realize that it's too big. This map is fucking enormous.
And yeah,
It-
huge.
it's because without those fast travel is the most useful feature in this entire game. Like, forget you. I could do without. Hey, take away the healing, take away the magic, take away the weapons. As long as you leave the fast travel,
You have to
I,
fight everything hand to hand.
oh sure, why the fuck, dude? You can with the right build. There are such a variety of fist based weapons in this game that yeah, you honestly could. Like
Yeah,
you've
I'm
got
excited to jump back in and try like a dramatically different build.
oh yeah, for sure. Like I started with a dex build because I like rapid fire attacks, and
Mhm.
so I gravitated toward the scimitars, sort of scimitar like weapons because that's another little small gripe I have with the game. The weapons seem to be just reskins of different weapon types, but some of what really sets them apart is their weapon arts, which is like the magic unique effect that each weapon has. So
Yeah.
for example, some of them heal, some of them just automatically put holy damage on your weapon, and some of them will just straight up shoot magic bolts at your enemies. And yeah, for all the while I do admit that every no, and not every enemy, every weapon is basically a reskin within their categories, there's still something there that, and even just from a design perspective, you could just pick the weapon that looks cool, even if it is the
Yeah.
same move
They
set.
they did so they did something that you see in a lot of these types of games, which makes sense. Of like, there's maybe I don't know 10 or 12 base weapon types, and
Hmm.
then each of those has a bunch of variants, right? So like, oh, there's your heavy melee weapons that all have kind of the same attack animations to them, and then you've got your scimitar type swords, your like heavier swords. You've got your like medium axes, your heavy axes, right? And like
Hmm.
each of those has a bunch of variants that maybe will work better with certain builds, right? Or have an art that you might like. But that's a sensible approach, right? Because I don't think it's realistic to expect a developer to have like 150 totally unique weapons that all have
That's
totally
true.
different animations, right? Like, so they have a happy compromise. I mean, Team Ninja does this with their Souls like. I mean, a lot of the Souls like games do this, right? They have your whatever a
Yeah.
6 to 12 classes of weapons and every weapon in that class has the same kind of basic animations and functions, basically the same. But then there's like a few differences between them, and you could kind of pick a favorite.
Yeah, honestly, that's a sidebar here. That's honestly why I like Bloodborne the best because it doesn't do that. Like it
Yeah,
has unique weapons,
yeah, no, you're
just
right.
different.
Bloodborne
Yeah,
Bloodborne is the exception. It's got a
yeah.
small number of weapons, but every single one of them is like its own thing. That's
Its
true.
own, yeah, yeah. But yeah, not to just going back to Elden Ring. But yeah. So with that said, do you have a specific weapon that you find yourself gravitating towards?
Yeah, I mean, so I went into Elden Ring thinking I'm gonna try a strength build this time because I had not done that since maybe Demon Souls. And I ended up going strength with some faith. So a little bit
Hmm.
of a little bit of magic. I could heal myself and stuff. And I was using like a battle axe for a while, but what I eventually settled on, and what you saw me using at the end there,
Mhm.
was the great axe, which is usually I usually don't go for like that tier of heavy weapons. I like to use generally like a sword and shield or an axe and shield, like a medium weapon. But
Right.
I went with like a heavy build this time, and until the final boss, it was working great. And if I could go on just a little bit of a sidebar, I think part of the reason that I got really into that weapon is, do you remember where you find the great axe in the game?
Yes, you do. There, it's being pulled by a. It's being well. It's in a chest that's
Yeah.
on a cart or a chariot that's being pulled by two stone digger trolls.
Yep. Yep. That's
And
exactly right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that to me was a really fun part of the game, and one of the things I appreciate that this game does that the previous games don't is that there's this cool, like ambient challenge of a wagon that's guarded by the two trolls up front that has a whole like retinue of dudes
Yeah.
protecting it.
Hmm.
And for me, right, defeating all of them and getting the chest out of it was like this really interesting challenge that I approached from different directions. I tried picking them off at range. I tried coming from the back. I tried attacking from the front. Um, I had to get stronger. I had to take a few shots at it. But when I finally accomplished it, it's like, I finally like defeated that crew that was guarding the chariot. What's in there? I opened the chest. There's a great axe. Like, man, I worked so hard to get this thing. I want to like try it out and use it.
Oh,
Uh,
oh
and,
yeah,
and then
for
I
sure.
ended up, going like deep into the great axe because of that like experience I went through to get it, which is such a fascinating like it was like the weapon had ingratiated itself to me before I
Oh
even
yeah.
picked it up.
Okay, so yeah, that and see that's awesome because you're pro because how many other people have stories like that? Like where
Yeah,
they just gravitate to one because nah, this is my weapon. Like I know there are other weapons out there, but I like
this
this
one is
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I think this game does really well, and it's one of the positive things that comes from the challenge of like when you clear these difficult things, these tricky parts, and you beat that boss you've been trying to beat, or whatever. A
Hmm.
lot of times that thing it drops, you're like, well, you extra appreciate it. You want to use it. You want to like play with it because you work so hard to earn it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and a lot of games don't. I know it's like a hackneyed thing that developers are like, oh, it's a sense of accomplishment, but you really do kind of feel that sense of accomplishment when you pull
Yeah.
stuff off in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's just so many of it, so many moments like that. Like oh my gosh. So just to and I could also kind of touch on just the foresight that the developers had here is
Mhm.
so you know the castle that has the Radon festival, right, in Caelid?
Yeah, that's another
Yeah.
great
Okay.
bit. Yes, of
So
course.
if you go there before, and this is actually going to go into my weapon that I've gravitated towards
Mhm.
for my strength build anyway, is you can actually go to the castle before the Radon Festival starts, and there's a boss battle there where a mini boss battle where you fight two bosses. What are those lion-looking guys with the lizard-like tail? I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I did
Uh,
that because isn't that where you meet the guy that's like the dad of one of the other characters?
no, 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 no. You're thinking of the castle that's at the bottom of the map, like on the Forlorn Peninsula.
Yeah, you're right. The world is so huge. I was like getting
Oh
confused
God,
between
yeah,
this.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
but
But yeah, I'm
I
talking.
know the enemy you're talking about.
Yeah, well, yes, that's the enemy. That is the main boss of that area as well. So that's kind of another thing. There's a bit too much repeat bosses, but we'll get to that later. For right now, yeah, the boss battle is one of those and a Crucible Knight. So
Yeah,
when
which are
you beat
brutal
that,
too. Yeah.
it is pretty brutal. But the reward for winning the fight is a legendary armament called the Ruin Sword, and it is literally a sword, a giant ass sword that was forged from the ruins of Farah Missoula that fell from the sky.
Damn,
And just
that's
like, and that's just the lore behind that weapon. The weapon itself is also super good because not only does it does physical and magic damage, it has S scaling with strength when you upgrade it all the way.
oh damn, that sounds dope. I don't know if I ever got that. I don't think I ever did. That sounds like an amazing weapon.
Well, yeah, because it's a hard weapon to get. Because who would
Yeah.
think to go to Radon or the Red Main Castle before the Radon Festival, and
And that speaks to one of the really interesting things. Just like you and me, everybody seemed to have a different experience running through this game because it is so open ended, and there's a
hmm
million hidden variables about doing things in different orders. That like, oh yeah, you
hmm
fought like a boss that I like never saw, and got a weapon I never saw, and there's probably a bunch of stuff I saw that you never did, and items I got that you never got to because like,
oh
oh, I talked to the right guy in the right place. Like if you go to
yeah,
this area before this area and talk to this guy, he'll appear here, but otherwise he won't appear there, right? Like there's a million things like that. And it can be a little frustrating because I do wish sometimes, like unlike most games, it doesn't give you any sort of tracking of any of that stuff.
yeah,
So
there really
if you're
doesn't, like, no quest log. That was a big
yeah.
criticism that I honestly kind of kept my mouth shut on, because yeah, honestly, that's a valid point. I mean, From Software did kind of address it in an update where they just show where NPCs are located on the map at any
And
given
that's
time,
nice. That's nice that
but
they do that. Yeah.
still, that's kind of like uh throwing the players a bone, but it's like one half of a chicken thigh, you know?
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, I liked the sense of exploration, but
Mhm.
it got to be too much to keep track of. Like I remember, I got into this. It's weird to even call them quest lines, right? Because it's all like informal, but
Mhm.
all the stuff with Blade, I think his name is right. The like Wolfman
Blythe.
guy, Blythe.
Blythe.
Yeah, he
Yeah, it's actually
and I would have run into him in a few places, and he'd be like, "Oh, meet me in so and so," and then I wouldn't be able to find him there, and then it was like, "Oh, you had to talk to this other person in this graveyard area before you're able to talk to him," and like tracking him down and all the places where he is, like it was maddening, right? And like
yeah, for sure, for sure. Like,
and even without, and I tried not to use like guides and stuff because it's part of the experience, but it's
eh,
wildly difficult to.
nah, honestly, I understand where you're coming from, and I honestly did that for my first playthrough, and there comes a point where eventually, you know what, I'm stumped. Like, this world is too damn big, and
No, I get it. I get it. Yeah.
if I try and do this on my own, I'm gonna forget.
Yeah,
And
no,
because
that happened to me too. I tried not to use, and here and there, I'd be like, I'm gonna have to check, because yeah, like you lose track of stuff, especially when you're trying to follow up on one of those things, or you get stuck somewhere. I got lost in a couple of that area in the sort of the south the southwest corner of the map. Where there's like that big plateau, and there was a bunch of stuff there that I kept getting lost because it's like multiple levels, but you
right,
can't see the levels on the map. That was super confusing. A lot of the
God,
underground stuff was super confusing. It, I get what they're going for because there is this sense of like exploration and wonder and everybody having a little bit of a different experience. But I hope that in a follow up they go maybe just one notch less confusing with some of that stuff.
yeah, honestly, same. Because you mentioned the map. Do not get me started on that damn map, because the there needs to be an update to the map that shows you different elevations, because
Yeah,
the I swear, I'm trying to find the village of the Albinarics in the Lake of Liurnia is such a pain in the ass, because if you just point to it on the map, just like, oh, it's right there and I'm right here. Why isn't the oh wait, there's a sheer cliff in front of me. How the fuck do I get up there? And then
yeah. That's a good
luckily,
example. I didn't find that place until super late in the game,
yeah,
because
yeah.
it was such a you had to approach from like one specific direction. And like a
You had
lot of
to
things, I stumbled on it. Like I wasn't even. It was like,
oh
oh
yeah.
shit, this is like a. I've heard people talking about this place.
Right, exactly, exactly. And shit. Speaking of things, I missed everything. Have you met the NPC Bach, the seamstress?
Seamstress. That doesn't sound familiar. I don't think so.
He was an inhuman, or not an inhuman, a demi-human. He's well, an ape-looking guy. He's got a bit of an accent. Well, if you don't know who I'm talking about, well then that's actually perfect, because me and my other friends, they were talking about, oh, Bach is so wonderful. Bach is such a great storyline. It's like, who the hell is Bach?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah, you got me
I
there. I don't know who
went
Bach is.
through my entire first playthrough without even meeting him. and he's at the very beginning of the game. He's cursed to look like a bush, and he just yells out to you, and you're just meant to be like, okay, where the hell is that voice coming from?
Oh, holy
Yeah.
shit, dude, is that what that is? Because
Yes.
I passed through that area a million times, and I heard the voice, and I was never able to find where that was coming from.
So this is yeah, yeah, that's what that is. So yeah, he's Bach the Seamstress. He's MP. He's a friendly NPC. He will take the capes off of your armors if you don't want the cape. If you think it looks better without the cape, as long as you get him his sewing supplies.
Oh,
Yeah,
neat. Because yeah, I
yeah.
had found variants of armors. Um, I didn't realize there was like an NPC that could change those for you. In fact, I
Mhm.
want to say that there might be another way to do that. Maybe the blacksmith or something can do that for
I
you.
think
Um,
so. I'm not sure.
yeah, but maybe it
Mm.
requires a different resource to do it. But that's wild because I distinctly remember passing by that talking bush and I was like, man, because I think it even makes some allusion to like, oh, I'm here in the bush, but I could never figure out like
Right,
what's the spot, what's the thing, where's it coming from? I
and
tried for
you
hours and hours, never did.
no, you want to know what did it for me though? What made me figure it out? People left messages around the bush that says like "try
Ah,
attack." Yeah,
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 that's
and,
yeah.
and
It
honestly,
might be
that's
I
what.
played early enough that I missed that.
Yeah, and I just want to get into that real quick because it sounds like we're kind of veering off a
Yeah,
little
I'm
too much in
sorry.
negative territory. But no, 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 it's fine, it's fine. I just to bring it back to the positives for a sec.
Hmm.
The community has been so goddamn supportive. It says
Amazing.
there are puzzles in that game where you genuinely looking at the notes that people leave on the ground will help you out. Like
Yeah, you're right.
um well, of course, the first being discovering where Bach is, and because Bach isn't the only NPC who's hidden as disguised as an object. Speaking of the village of the Albinarics, the guy who you're supposed to get a very important key item from in order to even access the place that will give you access to where the Halleck tree, where you eventually fight Millennia, Blade
Mhm.
of Mikola. Um, yeah, he's hidden as a jar, and if you look at the notes, you'll sure enough you'll see try attacking or try
Yep.
rolling,
That
something
one
like
I
that.
remember. That one I did find.
Yeah, yeah, and I will never forget because I was part of a Discord server that specialized in Elden Ring and just Souls like games, and again, this is just an experience that cannot be duplicated. When I first started playing and just going to Discord server, just like, hey, I found this thing. Does anyone know about this? Or hey, how do you deal with this? Or hey, what does this do? Or what is your experience with this? Some of the most fun conversations I have ever had.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted one of the things I wanted to highlight here, and part of why I really loved the experience is that it reminds me of something very particular that I very, very rarely experience with games that I feel like I only really experience with Elden Ring and to a lesser extent, the other FromSoft games. And I can't remember if you and I had this conversation, but
Hmm.
going through it and talking to people about it as I'm making progress and seeing the messages within the game reminds me so much of playing the original Zelda when I was a little kid before the
Hmm.
internet, and other kids would be playing it and you would be talking about it in school, and as different kids would figure stuff out in the game, you would like go home and try it, and it was this like long process of months. Like somebody would mention like, oh yeah, you can feed the bomb to that guy to make him explode, because that game, uh, these days it's like, well, we all kind of know the Zelda tropes or whatever, but imagine you're playing that game at you're like 6 7 years
Oh,
old.
yeah.
There's nowhere to go for any of that information, and we were like cobbling it together. It was like schoolyard conversations, and like Elden Ring reminded me of that. It was like you and all your friends are kind of figuring it out piece by piece, and you're talking about your experiences, and it really is. I think that feeling, those conversations that we were able to have, and that mindset that it puts you into that you so rarely experience with games, that's what made it like really special to me, and that's why for me it probably was like the top game of the year, like one of the more interesting games I've played in a really long time, because I just don't get to experience that a lot, and that's some of the stuff we're pointing out about like, well, some sometimes it's like maybe a little too confusing, but I guess the other side of that coin is the fact that it's confusing and weird and everything is different for everybody and there's a million hidden variables is what
Hmm.
leads to this interesting, like the interesting conversations around it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially I want to talk about this for a second. Is it seems like every From Software game has that one moment that I like to call the rite of passage moment.
Mhm.
So let's say for like in Sekiro, it's one of the okay. Just to define what I mean by From Software rite of passage moment is it's one of those universal experiences that everyone seems to experience on their first From Software playthrough of any game. So the go-to example that I always bring up is in Sekiro, where you face the mini boss called the Chained Ogre. It's the rite of passage moment is you get your ass grabbed and thrown off the cliff, because that is a unifying experience that people have on their very first playthrough. So for this one, I think Elden Ring has the best rite of passage moment, and it's when you accidentally stumble into Caelid when you're too underleveled. Because holy shit, let me tell you, I stumbled onto Caelid because I did the thing where you teleport to Caelid because to feed that guy Deathroot, right? So Fredo, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm listening.
Okay, wow, because you were like dead silent. Okay,
No, I was just like I was like, oh, what's the? Because I ended up in Caelid. I don't think I did that, but I ended up doing the teleport trap in that one chest, and I
yep, that's
actually
it.
hit it. I actually hit that on purpose because I
Oh, okay.
avoided it the first time, and I was like, I wonder where that takes me. So I like saved. I like burned all my souls and stuff, and then or not my souls, right? Your
Yeah, yeah,
what
your
is it in that game?
runes, the
Thank you, your
runes. Yeah.
runes. And then I went back and I'm like, well, I'm curious where this teleport trap leads. So I'm going to jump in the teleport trap. And then I ended up in fucking Galen like really early. And I'm like, oh, God damn it. And it took like hours to get back. I'm like, well, they really got me. But that was great. And I feel like that's one of those moments everybody has their like accidentally ending up in Galen, like, in that mine and then having to fight your way out of the mine. I mean, yeah,
Oh
that
no,
was,
yeah.
it was brutal, but fun, right? Like it's a
Oh my god,
cool
because
experience.
and it makes for a funny story,
It
and you laugh
does.
about it because it's just like, oh wait, no way, that happened to me too.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it's like filled with all these like super durable minor enemies. Like it's such a funny, like a funny, cruel thing. And you are absolutely right. The game is full of stuff like that that leads to stories, and that was a big part of like when I was working my way through the game, along with everybody else. Right, you were part of the discourse, and like that's a thing you rarely get to experience too, where there's like the big game that everybody's playing and having those experiences simultaneously, and you're able to like share those funny stories because yeah, that Caleb thing was definitely one. I think Radan was that story for a lot of people, trying to
Yes.
work their way through that fight and figure that one out. The first time you run into a tree sentinel, I know I avoided the first one, but I know a lot of players that like that really early tree sentinel that
Oh
you can
yeah.
fight, like
Oh
at
yeah.
some point just ran into him, got immediately owned. Um,
Nuked.
yeah, and I had the opposite. I avoided that guy forever, then forgot about him, then ran into him again like 150 hours into the game and just fucking absolutely wrecked, was able to beat him so easy at that point.
Oh man. But yeah, and honestly, you're still seeing people come with stories like that. Like how recently was it that someone tweeted out that they were in the city of Noxtella, and how do I remember all the places names except the beginning one? Jesus Christ. We were in but they were in the city of Noxtella, and that giant ball just rolls past him as he's standing on the railing to avoid it. The ball pauses and then proceeds to roll backwards and hit him and knock him off the railing to his death as enemies down there throw arrows at his corpse.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And they all, yeah, and I remember having those experiences with the older games too, because one of my all-time. I wonder if my buddy Howell listens to this because my friend Howell was over by the house, and I was playing. I forget which Dark Souls game it was, but I had one of these just funny experiences where I got invaded, and
Mm-hmm.
I like ran away from I like ran up the staircase, and it was one of these areas that had a trap where like one of those huge boulders would roll down. So like I got him to run away. He ran up, triggered the trap, and just got like run over by the ball and died. And my buddy was over. We just started laughing, like high fiving
Mm,
each other. It was such a funny moment.
mhm.
That is one that just lives with us forever. And like yeah, this game is chock full, whether it's like a success story or a story of you getting owned in a funny way, because that happened to be a bunch of times too, and a lot of those are also like memorable and funny, and other people had the same thing happen to them.
Oh my god, absolutely. And let me tell you, I'm actually now that I've played the game for 250 hours at last time I checked, I'm playing multiplayer with some people that just helping them through areas that they're having trouble with. And just to, well, kind of touching on the sheer size of this game, one
Mhm.
particular person I'm playing with has been playing for like 8 hours and hasn't even beaten the first mandatory boss yet. But because they want to level up first,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
But so
And you
yeah.
can spend that time, right? I mean, there's a lot to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like even I was starting to get impressed with just like, whoa, now that I think of it, it's like you haven't defeated the first boss, yes, what are you doing? But then I was like, oh, you're doing the millions of other things you could be doing
Yeah.
besides doing that for and but one thing though is as I was guiding them through the map, we ended up in the first underground area. That area I don't remember what the name is, but it's the area where you have to light those 6 torches in order to fight the ancestral spirit.
I remember that.
Ancestral,
That
yeah.
was yeah, that it
So,
was a tough area with
oh,
those like green spirit like Viking type
yeah.
guys. Yeah, those like tough enemies. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, those are the distractions though. The real enemies are those little balls of electricity who'll zap your ass if
Yeah,
you
those are
get.
brutal. Brutal. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So many times where I'm like fighting one of the green guys and I'm like, "Ah, yes, I just got him," and then get ganked from behind by one of those big electric balls like son of a bitch, it dies
No,
instantly.
and one thing I love too about this is that well, I think pretty much every From Software game does this, but the arrows stay stuck in your character's body
Yes.
for a little while before. So, and what makes this hilarious is that these particular arrows in this particular area are like the size of a fucking church door.
Yeah, they're
So
like
you'll
javelins, just huge ass things sticking out of you.
yeah, so one of the at least the moments where one of you will get hit like right through the head like a freaking sight gag, and you'll just you'll just tap your partner on the shoulder, just be like, hey, I feel, am I okay? Like, does this look infected? You know,
Yeah,
how's this look?
that's such
But
a I mean, yeah, that's such a funny thing,
the
when you have
slapstick, yeah.
6-foot javelin. Yeah, the slapstick of having the gigantic, just implausible, like, even if it wouldn't in a world where that doesn't kill you, your, like, head wouldn't be able to support the weight of that thing because it's so gigantic.
And you're just walking around
Like, normal,
effortlessly with it.
yeah, it's really funny.
And even but yeah, even then the serious moments though, because the same person who I was playing with, they'd never seen the ancestral spirit before. So honestly, my toxic trait is that I'm very flippant about spoilers. So like I feel like people like take quote unquote spoilers too seriously. Because what most people consider a spoiler are like surface level plot details, which if you're capable of, well, hot take, if you're capable of engaging with media beyond surface level plot details, that will diminish a lot of the power that spoilers have on you.
Mm.
But with that said, I did not say a word when we were outside the Regal and the Ancestral Spirit boss because I just wanted to.
Yeah,
I
see the
like
reaction to it.
yeah, I literally just let because I had them on voice chat and I just told them I was like, I'm not gonna say a word, just go through the fog wall and I want to I want to hear your genuine reaction. And what ended up happening was she was so mesmerized by how beautiful that boss is that she literally just let herself get hit.
Yeah, that was a cool I remember that whole and one of the things I think the game also does really, really well is for those bosses like that where you have to do a bunch of stuff to like activate it, right? So in that
Mhm.
case of like activating all those torches, which could take hours, it's like
Mhm.
you're rewarded with a really interesting or gorgeous looking boss. It's like they know how to sprinkle in the unique, interesting bosses in such a way that they almost they feel like a reward of like, all right, you went through this like complicated sequence and now you get to like experience this really cool, interesting fight.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's another thing. This is the game that I feel perfected the feeling of your exploration will be rewarded.
Yeah.
Because I platinumed this game and I still am discovering new things about it. Like just the other day, I because I'm at the point now where I have to look up guides just to see what I missed. So
Right,
I
because you've
realized
got 90% of the stuff or whatever.
no, not even dude, I'll be surprised if it's that high because there's still like so many side quests, so many NPCs that I haven't talked to, so many quest lines I haven't followed because you only need to get 3 endings to in order to get the platinum. But apparently there's the dung eater, like that's who's mentioned in the opening cutscene. You meet him eventually, and he has his own unique ending that you could get at the end, which I still haven't gotten. 250
Oh,
hours later.
yeah,
Later,
I've
yeah.
heard about that. I did find that guy, the loathsome dung eater,
Yeah.
and I think
Poo poo man.
I think I ended up killing that guy and have his armor or
I
something.
mean, yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
Because the area where he's in is a complicated labyrinth of sewers, and honestly, no matter which FromSoft game it is, I not a fan of labyrinths. So, because yeah, they make me panic.
Yeah, no, I mean it's easy to get lost. That guy reminded me of Yurt from God, was it Demon Souls or Dark Souls 1, who was that like NPC that would start like killing the other NPCs if you let him back at your base. So I saw that guy and I'm
Yes.
like, man, I don't trust this dude. That's another thing, by the way, that I'm glad this game doesn't have any of that kind of bullshit because I remember, like, in whichever game I'm thinking of, Yurt could kill like the magic trainer, so you like couldn't learn spells anymore in in that playthrough. Like
Mm,
seriously hobbling stuff that you didn't really have any like obvious indication. I mean, there were like clues that he was like bad,
hmm
but there were a lot of players that got tricked by that, and that's brutal. You're like, oh hey, you're 80 hours into the game, like no more magic. I guess you have to restart the
mm,
game.
oof,
Yeah.
rough. Whereas, and speaking of magic, I kind of want to delve into my more criticisms now because speaking of magic, I feel like for the late game, the game kind of tries to bully you into using magic because you can get don't get me wrong, it's possible to beat the game with just a pure melee build. I've done it, I've seen streamers do it, it's
Hmm.
doable, but magic is easy mode for this game.
I mean, magic is
So, yeah.
strong. It
Yeah.
is. And I do I get what you're saying,
Mhm.
and I'm inclined to agree because I think part of the reason that they made respecking so easy in this game is that they're kind of like encouraging you. Like there's fights and there's parts of the game where they're certain builds obviously make it much easier,
Mhm.
and I was kind of like you, because I only used faith for like buff things and healing myself. I was really, just using melee. And yeah, there were certain parts of the game that were very, very difficult that if I just gone like, you know what, I'm just going to respec and be like a wizard for this part, like it probably would have been a lot easier. But I guess I was too trained by the old games. I like never wanted to do that. I was like, no, I got to get through with my character. And other than the final boss where I needed help, I would
Right.
eventually pull it off. It was harder, but I would
Mhm.
eventually pull it off. And I'm sure if you went through as a magic character, which I might do on my next playthrough, I bet you'll run into a
Same.
lot of parts where you're like, oh shit, if only I had a shield here, if only I was like a melee guy, this fight would be a lot easier.
Right. But here's the thing though, you could wield magic and also have a shield on hand just in case.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But yeah, I get what you're saying because here's the thing: I like in my explorations, especially of the Academy of Raya
Leia
Lucaria.
Lucaria, yeah, that
Yeah.
place was cool. Yeah.
Oh my god, you find the most powerful, like I think it's a scepter, or yeah, you find the most powerful scepter in the game in that area because of course it's the literal school of magic.
Yeah, it's the Magic Academy. That
Yeah,
makes
but
sense.
I've because that requires you to level intelligence though, and I never level intelligence.
Same, same. I
So
never used any of that stuff. I never used any of those spells. My intelligence was just whatever it was at the beginning, right?
non-existent.
8 or
Yeah.
whatever the
But yeah, but it makes me want to start a new character with a magic build because I just want to. Because here's the thing, I just want to be able to learn to know how to play as a magic character, just to learn it.
Yeah. Yeah, me
Yeah,
too. Me too. I mean,
yeah.
us talking about this and us jumping back in where you were helping me to beat the boss, like made me
Mhm.
get into that mindset. And I'm currently, shout out to Hollow Knight, which I'm currently trying to finish years after the fact. I'm taking a second run at that game right now, and probably when I finish that, I will have a look at a second run at Elden Ring.
Oh, absolutely. And just in case the listeners are curious, how about we just go into what we mean by that time I helped you try to fight the final boss?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I mentioned earlier, right? Like I was a heavy melee build. I played through the whole game like when it dropped, right? I mean, I got it day one. I figure you did too or close
Yes,
to
I
that.
did. Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
And I made it all the way through, but I just could not beat that final boss. And I was the hours and hours. I must have like dozens of hours, maybe not, maybe 10 hours, like a long time, right? Like multiple sessions of me just trying to beat that boss, and I just could never do it. And eventually I was like, well, I'm going to take a break, play some other stuff. And then, that became an extended break. And I just, I never did it.
Mhm.
And you had mentioned to me about doing this show, and I was like, I'm a little embarrassed because I actually never finished a game. I did everything but the boss. Well, not everything, but I
Yeah, I know
made
what
it
you
up.
mean. I know
Yeah,
what you mean.
made it up to the boss, and I could just never manage it. And then you very kindly offered to jump on and help me. You're obviously much more skilled at the game than me. I got that sense from watching
Oh,
you there.
thank you.
Um, but we weren't able to do it together either. We just never, just
Yeah.
never lined up.
We burned out. We
We
burned out.
burned
That's
out. And
yeah.
then later on, I forget if it was that night or the next night, I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna like mess around with this some more. And I pulled in some rando, and I got lucky, and I got one of those like super one of those guys that's
Mm,
probably tore through that final boss 1,000 times, and he just effortlessly beat it, like barely got touched,
mhm.
ground out its health, 1 minute to beat like both forms, just crushed the boss. And then I
Yeah.
got to the end because of this like rando guy that helped me out. But a year later, right, like I took a
Mhm.
very long break. I was, I was resigned to like, well, I love the game, but I could just, that final boss, I know we're trying to stay positive here, but I was just not a
Yeah,
fan of
but I
that fight.
mean,
It was very hard.
no. Let's see. Here's the thing. There's another unifying sentiment among the Elden Ring fan base, and that's fuck Elden Beast.
They don't like the
No,
Elden
no
Beast.
one
Yeah.
likes the Elden Beast fight
Yeah.
because Radigan, and it's kind of shame too because it kind of retroactively ruins the Radigan fight
Yeah,
because
which is a good fight.
it is a great fight.
Yeah, but having to play through it 100 times because you have to do both of those bosses, yeah, you get really burnt out on it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I, I can only imagine, given the super success. I mean, the Souls games were obviously big breakaway successes for From. They never had anything that was that big before. Armored Core and Kingsfield were like hits, but those games were mega hits. But Elden Ring was like an ultra hit, right? I mean, it was like
Hmm.
a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of people game of the year, millions and millions of copies. So one can only assume that they will make another, if it's not Elden Ring 2, another game that's, an open world Souls game. So I hope they learn the lesson from the way people are responding to Elden Beast to not do something
Something like
like that. I
because
hope.
here's the thing. You cannot tell me that someone made the last minute decision to disallow you from using your horse in that fight because
Yeah, I don't know. And you were right to point it out because you have to cover so much distance. And we were talking about it a bunch because we were on there for hours and hours playing it. So, like,
mhm,
maybe it's because they want you to summon people, they want you to experiment with builds, they want you to use magic. I don't know what they were, trying to do there. But not having access to the horse makes that
mhm.
fight a lot more frustrating. Um, it feels like, unlike the other fights I mentioned, earlier on in this conversation, that like one of the things I like is you can always like get stronger and go back to something. But with that
Mhm.
boss, even if you're maxed out, right? I had like maxed out weapons, and the maxed out weapons barely hurt it.
Yeah,
Your
it doesn't mean
level
shit if you can't hit him.
Yeah, and you're
Yeah.
level 150 with heavy armor, and it still kills you in like 2 hits, sometimes one
Mhm.
hit. Like its stats are so ridiculous. You have to go through it flawlessly, and its patterns are absurd. Where it's going miles away. It's like a very lengthy fight. You have to stay flawless for so long. And I know
Mhm.
it's like they want it to be this like big skill check at the end of the game, but it was too much. I really
Yeah.
do think it was too much, and I'm usually very tolerant of what they go for in these games, but that it was just too extreme for me.
Yeah, honestly, and like I said, just to give you an idea of how universal the sentiment is I follow a Twitch streamer called Jesus Here's Toast, and
Mhm.
he nicknames his stream the Church of Getting Good because
Oh, yes, you told me about
because
this guy, yeah.
yeah, and I love the guy because he puts his money where his mouth is. Like he shows what it takes to get good, and he's willing to die over and over and over again until he gets the dodge timing perfectly. Which, my god, the minute he realized that the dodge roll comes out when you release the button, not when you press the button, was one
Yeah,
of the funniest moments on the stream because he literally gasped and just cursed Miyazaki's name to the heavens, jokingly, of course.
yeah.
But it was still one of those great moments. And all this to say that even he says that Elden Beast fight is just not good.
Yeah,
Eh,
I don't I would love to have been a fly on the wall. Well, I don't speak Japanese, so I guess it wouldn't have helped to be a fly on the wall when they were planning that out. But it is definitely a like what were they thinking thing. I
That's
am
exactly what it is.
genuinely
Yeah.
curious what they were thinking, and I don't mean that like a derisive like what were they thinking, but I mean it
No,
as a like
yeah.
I really wonder what they were going for with that because the design of this game is otherwise so immaculate, and with so many of these encounters you can kind of see exactly where they're coming from
Hmm.
and the different options that are available to you for how to tackle them. But with that, it really felt like they were just throwing in like a fuck you at the end of the game with this just
That's really what it feels like. Yeah.
astonishingly difficult. And I think that those are examples of that kind of like, yeah, that fake difficulty thing I was talking about earlier, about the fact that like the boss is huge, so you can't see the tells for its attacks if you're trying to hit it. It moves
Hmm.
away from you and you have to run up to it and burn all your stamina, and it'll like move away again. You have to be reliant on the RNG for it to not move around enough for you to hit it.
Right.
It's just, yeah, its hitboxes for the space it takes up are bigger than the hitboxes to hit it. So sometimes it's just ambient movement will push you away so that your attacks won't hurt it. It's like just
Right.
bullshit stuff like that that you would see in like early 3D games that
Hmm.
is annoying and that most games these days don't do. Like you don't see that kind of shit in like God of War, right? But like
Right. Right.
they, I don't know, for some reason with that boss they were like, no, we're gonna go straight up like bullshit PS1 like like asshole stuff.
Right.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't
I
have a
think
lot of tolerance. Like I'm old. I've been playing video games for a long time, and that stuff. I never want to deal with that stuff ever again in my life.
right, I understand. That's perfectly understandable. And I think the funniest thing you said that night was you was like, "Oh, look at all these loading screens depicting better moments in this game."
Yeah, yeah, because I hadn't played the game in a long time. So as we were like running to that boss, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's it's that I
It
forget his name again, Blade the Wolfman." Like, "Oh yeah, I
was,
remember all
yeah.
the stuff with that guy," or "Yeah, I remember that boss fight," or "Hey, I remember this area." And one of the loading screens that popped up was that wagon where I got the great axe, and it reminded
Yep.
me of that like great. Oh yeah, that was so cool. I'm like, "Oh damn it, this Elden Beast again!" like,
Oh god. Oh boy. Well, now that we got that out of our system,
hmm
who's your favorite boss
Ooh,
that you faced? I should say because
yeah,
there's like 1,010,000 bosses in this fucking game.
yeah. Geez, that's really tough. I'm thinking back to like all the ones that I can even remember.
I mean, just describe what they look like. You don't have to tell me their name or anything. I'll probably just
Yeah, I mean,
because there are too many characters whose names start with G,
yeah.
R, and M, and I think I know who's responsible for that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that boss we were talking about earlier, where you have to like use the torches to summon them. I thought that was a really cool one. That one's
Ooh,
definitely
yeah,
up
the
there for
ancestral
me.
spirit. Yeah.
Yes, the ancestral spirit. Some of the like template bosses, I know that like people don't like the Crucible Knights and they're like annoying or whatever, but I
Ah.
did dig that
Yeah.
each of them was a slightly different take on, it was like a knight, but they have a different weapon or a different magic ability. So I did
Mm-hmm.
like running through all those and seeing the different variants of them.
Uh-huh.
What I really don't like are bosses that are multiple characters, because when you go in there with summons, they
Yeah.
always kill your summon right away, and then they overwhelm
Mm-hmm.
you, and it's another like fake difficulty thing where like, okay, there's no window to hit them. I just have to hope the RNG has like one of them stay far back enough or something.
Yeah.
Um, so like I remember in the mine there was or one of the mines had like you had to fight three guys, and one of them was like a magic, one of them had they were like those like stone guys that you fight in the
Oh, the
mine.
crystal guys. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I liked
Yeah.
the other versions of that fight until the one where there was three guys and it was so hard and I had to just
Yeah.
try to get one of
So
them right away. Yeah, sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
So the strategy with those guys is that they're very weak to blunt, to like
Yes, I
strike weapons.
realized
So
that.
yeah.
Yes, I realized that later on.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not formally a boss fight, but the thing with the wagon to get the great axe, I thought was
Oh,
really
okay.
great.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go with, let's rephrase it then to best boss fights or best just moments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a great moment for me. Radon was another fight
Yo,
that annoyed me a lot, and I
Brada.
hated it. But
Eh,
at one point, it like clicked, and when that
mhm.
fight clicked for me, it was like this really interesting moment. I was like, "Oh, I get how this boss is
It's a
supposed to
siege
work."
boss. Yeah, he's a siege
Yes.
boss.
And that was a very, very cool just moment where it was like,
Cinematic,
yeah, and it was
masterful.
playing with
Yeah.
the mechanics in a way that I didn't expect, right? So like
Wait, how do you
that
mean?
was a really cool one, because Radon, the like trick to Radon and I know you're good at the game, so you could just fight him. But the
Right.
trick for a lot of players is that you're not meant to just run into him and fight him, because he's
Right.
constantly spamming these huge AoEs. You're supposed to stay away from him and kite him and use all of the summons, and it's this like long fight that you're supposed to like, constantly summon your dudes and keep distance between you and him. But I didn't
Right.
realize that. I didn't realize that
Mm.
until I've been fighting him for like hours, and then eventually it clicked and I'm like, "Oh,
Hmm.
this is like a I'm supposed to stay on horseback. I'm supposed to keep distance. I'm supposed to stay like miles away from him." And it's this game of like keep away. The boss arena is gigantic. I didn't realize how huge it was.
It's
And it was so
enormous.
clever, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
every other boss in the game you fight kind of the same way, and then there's this guy that like, oh no, this is a totally different approach. We set
Hmm.
you up with a totally different thing where you're
Oh
using
my
these
god.
like summoning
The whole
mechanics.
the whole build up when you're standing there in the atrium listening to that guy do his speech is
Yeah,
just
it's so cool.
like if you do not feel hype to fight that boss after that, then you have no soul. Like I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that one that rocks. That was just
Yeah.
such a cool moment. Everything building up to it, and the cleverness of the fight itself. Yeah,
Hmm.
a plus tier stuff.
Oh, and that actually reminds me of another rite of passage moment. Just like everyone remembers the first time they get massively walloped by the Radon meteor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which, funny story, I didn't get hit by it, but it was, of course, it was completely by accident. But what happened instead was, it was like something out of a goddamn Wile E. Coyote cartoon where the explosion like happened. When he landed, the explosion happened like right behind me and killed all of the NPCs that I had summoned just immediately. So not only I mean, I barely managed to avoid the damage there, but now I'm left alone with Radon.
Yeah. God,
Which,
I'm thinking, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh yeah, there's some great I forget the name of that character, but another encounter that I thought was really interesting is in that Raya Lucaria Academy.
mhm.
There's that
The prawn guy.
no, no, there's a I guess it manifests as like a red, it's not an invader, right? But it's like an AI invader, and it's like this mage character that's constantly running away from you and spamming spells, and you have to go through like this gauntlet to kind of chase her down to the area where you're actually able to fight her. And I thought that was another just really interesting encounter.
Oh, okay. There's Okay, so there's a red character you said that you face in Raya Lucaria?
Yeah,
Okay.
I remember it was, you needed to unlock, like, you know how you could get, like, the other version of there that, like, if there's a certain key you could use and it's like a mirror version, where you're, like, on
Oh,
the ceiling and
oh,
shit? Yeah.
oh, that. Okay, yeah, and
That
I
was Raya Lucaria, right? Or am I thinking about another area?
or did you is it another area where that guy in the comically big Jura, I think his name is, with the guy with the really big hat and the really long sword?
No, I know the guy you're thinking of, but this is, like, a totally separate this might be a thing that maybe you never ran into.
Maybe.
I don't remember
So
the name of that character, but it was a neat encounter.
where and so okay, go into more detail then, because I apparently had missed this one.
Yeah, so it's like you're basically working your way through this library and there's a bunch of other enemies. So what it's an extended encounter where you're basically chasing them down and you're contending with the enemies that are in between you and them, and then you'll reach them and maybe get
Oh,
one hidden and then they'll teleport
oh,
away.
okay. Okay,
Yeah.
I know which area you're talking about right now, because it's in that space. It's in that building where go, you have to do Ronnie's quest line and put the statue in to
Yes, you
turn the
put the
building
statue
upside
in
down.
exactly. And it's
That
like a
part, yep,
library type building.
yep,
Yes,
that part.
exactly.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it was, like, really tough, but when I did it, it was I felt like, "Oh, hey, I finally, figured this out." It was like and I think the reward for that was some kind of, like, imp-based character thing. I'm like, "Oh, I can't even use it." But, hey, it was a neat, like, interesting fight, an interesting encounter, and I guess I like the ones where they do just cool, like, almost meta stuff like that, where it's not just a fight, it's like, "Oh, yeah, you're chasing this enemy, or you have to figure out the right way to approach this enemy."
Mhm.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. What was the
Oh,
one, the, like, ferryman ghost that you fight in, like, the water? That was a cool one too.
oh, yeah, yeah, I know the fairy. There's another name. There's an official name for them, but yeah, the ferrymen who are always like in the ruins and stuff, and they have those big ass horns that also double as an oar. Yeah, those are
Yeah,
fun. Those are fun fights too, especially if you have a holy based weapon, it melts their health. Like,
yeah.
if you really want to feel like a badass, yeah. A mariner, that's what they're called.
Yes, the
Mariners,
Mariners, yeah,
like the
yeah, I
Seattle
mean,
baseball
it's
team.
there's so much great stuff.
Hmm.
I thought I know that there's a lot of different ones, but the Tree Sentinels, a lot of those are fun encounters too,
Yeah,
and great designs.
yeah.
Yeah, we could go on about it forever. There's a lot of terrific bosses, and I think all the ones you have to fight, right? Like Margit and
Oh yeah,
oh god, what was that? Yeah, like I
Gideon
thought
the
all
Grafted, who
those
cuts off his own arm and replaces it with a dragon head.
or Godric. Is that Godric or is there a
No,
Gideon?
Godric is at the end. Or is Godfrey the or Gideon? Oh no, Gideon is the, too many fucking same
I
letter day.
know.
Okay, no, Gideon is the guy in the main hub who's the all-knowing guy. Godfrey. Wait, which one is Godfrey
Godfrey
and Godric?
Godfrey is the golden ghost with, like, the big axe, because that's the one that's, like, the
The
first
first
Elden
Elden
Lord,
Lord,
yeah,
yeah.
that you fight, like, before the, like, final boss
Right. And
sequence.
Godric, yeah, Godric the Grafted is the guy who cuts off his own arm and replaces
Yes,
it with
that
it, yeah.
Godric was a cool yeah, that was a cool one too.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Like, honestly, my personal favorite boss fight, it was Radahn until I faced Moog. Did you get to that part with Moog?
I'll have to double check what Moog let's
Okay,
see, the
so
Lord
he's
of
in the
Blood.
boss arena that has the big egg and that's in the on the altar.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so he's called himself. This is kind of the confusing thing about Elden Ring is that I don't blame people who there are people who used Scarlet Rot based weapons against Malenia, even though Malenia is made of rot. But I cut them some slack because Moog is the Lord of Blood and he's somehow weak to bleed.
I remember this guy, and I remember him being extremely tough.
He is extremely tough, but he is also my favorite boss fight in the entire game because he was the boss where the game actually clicked for me. It's like
Uh-huh.
this is kind of similar to your axe story. Like you hold on to that axe because you felt like you accomplished something when you got that axe. For me, it was when my sense of accomplishment came when I finally defeated Moog because I didn't look up any guides. I didn't look up any. spells or weaknesses or anything. I figured it out on my own and learned the dodging timing on my own, and yeah, I managed to beat him. Although I will say that's not entirely accurate. There is a special like physic that you have to there's a crimson tier that you have to mix into your little physic thing. A physic is, for those who don't know, your vial of mixed physics is a little potion that you could use to give yourself temporary buffs for a fight, and one of them is a special buff that's unique to that boss fight. So you know the part in the middle where he basically heals himself while also damaging you.
And you can,
Yeah.
yeah, the physic, there's that one, I
Yeah.
remember this, that there's like a certain combination you can use to prevent yourself from getting owned by
From
that.
getting owed by that. Yeah, which he's still a tough fight even with that, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
like, you
it's
don't get, like, instantly, yeah, I mean, and wild, right? And say that
mhm.
also reminds me of, like, the shackles that you can use in a few of the bosses,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Margit, and
yeah.
I forget, well, does Moog have a shackle too? I think he does.
I think he does,
That
honestly,
you
yeah.
can use the shackle in the fight and paralyze him for to get, like, a couple hits in too,
And
which that's
Malekith,
also
yeah.
neat. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, Malekith also has if you get the Black Blade, which requires you to do all the stuff in that volcano manor, um
Yeah, that volcano manor,
you
yeah.
could parry certain attacks of his, but only certain attacks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. That's another thing I found really interesting that I think up until the Elden Beast, every like non-optional boss has
Mhm.
one or two things like that, of like a special item that gives you an advantage against them specifically that you could find.
Yeah.
And I like that they did that, because if you're like really stuck on that boss, like, all right, well, you can get this like shackle that makes this fight easier and you get a few free hits in, or something like
Right.
that. I like that it had that kind of stuff. Would have been
Yeah.
nice to have something like that for the Elden Beast, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, shit. All this talk about bosses, and we still haven't addressed the elephant in the room.
Mhm.
Good old Melania, Blade of Mikola.
I was never able to beat Melania either.
Okay, I
Yeah.
have beaten her, but I have never soloed her. So you know what? Come at me, nerds. Maybe. Oh, you didn't
Yeah.
really beat Melania then.
Let
Fuck
me solo
off.
her. I came. That was one boss where I came within like one sliver of health of beating her, and then I just like never came that close again. I'm like, man, that I'm like too frustrated. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, yeah, and she is the boss though. Like the way I like to put it is that she bullies you into using as many tools as you have at your
Yeah,
disposal. And if you're not using bleed or frost, then you're kind of at a severe disadvantage. But fucking waterfowl dance, like
yeah,
that's one thing that I straight up,
ridiculous.
yeah, I had to Google that just to see what to do. And here's the thing. One of the strategies is to run away from the first two and then dodge the other two parts of that attack. I can only run away fast enough from that attack if I don't have any armor on, which is why I imagined Let Me Solo Her fights her without armor on, which
Oh yeah, that never even occurred to me.
oh, trust me, you have to think outside of the box and the fucking ozone layer to come up with strategies to beat Melania. But
Yeah, I remember
yeah.
seeing a video about that on like Twitter or something, of like it's so specific and non-intuitive that like, oh, you have to like dodge towards her in the middle of that sequence, and then wait a beat before you dodge the four, like you would never intuitively figure out that timing, so it's like
Hmm.
you have to look it up, I guess. Well, I don't want to say you would never, because some players obviously did, but most players wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. But she is definitely the hardest boss in all of Soulsborne. And that honor used to belong to Orphan of Cause from the Bloodborne DLC, because I swear to God that guy is sentient sometimes. But I think Millennia still edges him out, because I can't imagine what Orphan of Cause would be like if every time he hit you he healed.
I know
Yeah.
that's an I mean, it's absurdly over the top difficult, but it is like a totally optional encounter. So it's like, well,
It
hey,
is.
they
Yeah.
put that in there for the super hardcore heads. I'm not as mad about that as I am about
Yeah,
the
because
Elden
here's the thing.
Beast.
You don't stumble into Millennia on accident. You
Yeah,
just don't.
yeah,
You have to try and get there. And
yeah. And I got
uh,
there and
yeah,
did the
yeah.
fight a bunch, and I was like, this
And you know
is
what? the short loading times and the convenient checkpoint can only do so much, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And it's great that that's there in general, right? I mean, the
Mhm.
fact that this being on current gen consoles and having the solid state drives and not a lot of loading throughout the game, that helps a lot. Because I remember, in the days of Demon Souls and Dark Souls, when a boss would beat you and you'd have to like, oh, here's a 90-second loading time before I could take another shot at it. That shit was exhausting. So it's
Yeah.
good that this game doesn't have that stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
on a technical level, I do think it's like really impressive, right? That it renders like because I think once you load into the game, there's like no load times, right? So like unless you die,
Right,
which
right.
happens a lot. But it's impressive that they're able to like keep it going, given the size of the world and the complexity of everything in it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because at the end of the day, for all of our gripes and groans about it, it is a phenomenal game. Because one thing I wanted to point out when you mentioned the Game of the Year awards is that it actually when it walked away with every single major Game of the Year award, the golden like the BAFTA, the
Hmm.
Golden Joystick,
Golden joysticks,
yeah.
yeah.
You know what the other two games to do that were?
In history,
Yes.
God, that's an interesting question. If you give me years, like give me years, and I'll see if I can guess.
I'll just tell you because we're
All
kind
right,
of
all
because
right, you're cutting it low on time.
yeah we're recording this on Zencaster. Zencaster has a
Uh,
2 hour limit. We're at
gotcha.
39 minutes now, so I don't kind of want to
Okay, okay.
cut down on the dead time. But I mean, still plenty of time. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was. I find this interesting. They were Breath of the Wild and
Uh-huh.
Skyrim,
Yeah.
two other games that have that were praised for resetting the standard for open world games,
That's
which yeah.
interesting, and it makes a lot of sense because one of the observations I made is like this year it seemed like at most publications it was really between Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok, and I think both of
Mhm.
them excel at slightly different things, and I can see why somebody would like either game better, but I think to
Yeah,
someone that's really into games, Elden Ring is more interesting in terms of moving the medium forward and doing things that you don't typically
that's
see in games.
that's exactly
Yeah.
it. And you know what?
God of War
Yeah,
is like, a better narrative game and it's more
yeah.
intuitive and I think that the difficulty curve is like like there's a lot of stuff to really really like about that game,
Mhm.
but I think Elden Ring is a better game for like, pushing games forward or however you want to put it, and I think that's why it tended to win so much in those direct, head-to-head matchups.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned better narrative because listeners, there's a reason we have not touched on the story of Elden Ring because there's just too much goddamn shit.
It's a fun, I think the story of Elden Ring, it's like it's world building for you to lose yourself in, and it's
Yeah,
fun and
that's yeah.
interesting, but
Mhm.
there's not like a cool thread you can follow through like in the New God of War, which has this very
Mhm.
like, interesting story about the relationship between the father and the son and how it develops. We're not talking about that game, but you're not going to
Right.
see anything like that. You're going to get a bunch of little stories that are interesting, and you're going to get a bunch of world building and stuff like Radon and his little horse that he learned magic, so he doesn't have to give up his little horse because it was too.
Yes.
There's a lot of great stuff like that that's really enjoyable, but it's
Mhm.
not. It's not like a digestible, cohesive big story. It's like little snippets, and every player will get different bits of those little snippets as they work their way
Mhm.
through that world.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and for everything else, just watch Vati video or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I think this is a good spot. We're covered up on 82 minutes of recording time now. So
Mhm.
I feel like what you said earlier about how this Elden Ring is the game that it is for all of its faults, a it is a cultural milestone as far as video gaming is. And for that, I have to love it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, final verdict on Elden Ring. 250 hours. Here's to at least 250 more, and let's hope that a lot of them is with me playing with either you, Fredo, or any other friends out there, any other
Yeah.
tarnished,
I
tarnished
look
out
I
there.
look forward to. I mean, It's gonna be interesting to see how they follow up on this, because yeah, I really do think that this is like an evolutionary moment in gaming, and I know you said earlier about like yeah those other open world games that were like unanimous. It is rare that we have a game that's like head and shoulders above everything else, and it's gonna be challenging for them to build on this because that's real innovative, revolutionary kind of stuff. So in Elden Ring 2, as wonderful as that would be, like this is not a feeling that you're going to get often. So yeah,
Exactly.
really really impressive. I think it's a must play for all its faults and its unintuitive, sometimes overly obtuse nature. I think it's like if you're into video games, you owe it to yourself to check this one out, because I think in the next few years we're going to see more people taking attempts at this like open world Souls like thing, like much like how they made the Souls like a genre. I think that they've now made the Elden Ring genre. It's just that it's going to take some time before we really start to
Yeah.
see stuff, in that space.
All right. Well, yeah, I feel like that's a good bow to wrap this up in. So, Fredo, for all the people who are hearing you for the first time, or people who just need a reminder, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Twitter while it's still around,
Oh God.
at utwitily. That's UTWITILY. You twit. I love you. And yeah, I've got links to. I'm also on Twitch at Fredo Fabrucci. You can find the link to my Twitch on Twitter. I haven't found. Wherever we're all going to go after Twitter, because that new the latest in the Musk updates of it's only going to be verified accounts in polls and for you and stuff. So
Hmm.
if you're listening to this, look for me there, and hopefully it will still be around.
Yeah, for sure. And to that same effect, the name of the show is Busted Limes. You could find us on Twitter at Busted Limes Pod for as long as Twitter is still alive. You could follow me at Noblekind92. You could follow my co-host Black Belt at Black Belt 1996, I believe. I always forget this. Just ask any regular listener. We do have regular listeners, right?
I,
Yeah, we do.
I would hope so. You have me. I listen.
And we appreciate you. That's why we love you, Fredo. But yes, you could follow my co-host Black Belt at Black Belt 1998. He's much more active on Twitter than he is on this show. That sounded uglier than I anticipated. Black Belt,
Got his
I'm
ass.
sorry.
Damn. Tell us how you really feel.
Damn. But yes, to all of our wonderful listeners, to Fredo, and to all of our fellow Tarnished, thank you for busting a line with us.
Live forever.